And just to briefly introduce our next speaker, before I eat in too much into his time. So Thomas Kolster is going to give us a spotlight talk on simplifying sustainability communication. So in a nutshell, an ad man on a mission. Think Don Draper with society and environment as his key client. Counting 15 years of experience in ad agencies, Thomas is a passionate believer of the power of communications and the role that it can play within driving a more sustainable future. Those who already haven't read his fantastic book, Good Advertising, make it your first point of call tomorrow. Fantastic insight from an industry that I've personally not had that much experience with kind of recently. So without further ado, we'll leave and you can join, Tom. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for that introduction. Being a madman is not the best introduction to get on stage, but anyway. Thank you so much, Sedex, for inviting me here today. It's my true pleasure to be here. And I must admit, I probably can't teach you a lot here today. You're all very seasoned sustainability professionals. You know all about supply chains, and I'm sure that quite a few of you also know quite a bit about communication. So what I want here today is really just to remind you of what you actually already know, and that is to KISS. So keep it simple, stupid. And that's a very hard discipline to master. Because I actually do believe when we talk about are people willing to pay more for sustainable products, do people care where their things are made, do people care about ethics? I do actually think they care a lot. The problem is that for the most of the time, we're not able to tell a story that is engaging, actionable, and simple. So that is the real challenge, and that's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. I'll try just to open up a little bit and become a little bit transparent myself. So that's the next 20 minutes for you. Be ruthlessly simple or fail. But as I said, let me open up and be a little bit transparent myself. So I apparently have 40 slaves working for me, sad to say. My carbon footprint is 464% above what it needs to be for us to reach the UK targets. When it comes to my health monitoring, thanks to Apple, I moved about 11 kilometers yesterday. I think that's about 8 miles, right? I think, yeah. Traveled quite a bit the last year. To quite a few countries, probably even more in Asia, that's not covered. In one of the 7 airlines I flew with last year, I had about 15 flights, and actually since 2013, apparently I traveled around the globe 2.2 times. So this is the numbers, but I think it's so important that we don't confuse numbers and transparency with communication, because communication is something completely different. It's actually taking all these numbers and turning them into magic, and this is where the hard part is. I'm going to jump over the book and all that stuff because I think Tom already did that very well. Thank you for plugging me that way. But one question I want you guys to think about in your daily lives and when you think about your programs is really this one question. Can this be said or done more simply? So before you start any initiative, try to answer that one question. And it's not an easy question to answer. I don't know how many of you were at the dinner last night, but I really enjoyed the thing that John Morrison said from Human Rights Institute. Understanding the complexity, but deduct the essence. So your job is really essentially to peel away those redundant layers of communications, and that is not an easy job. The way I normally talk about it is really imagining that you have to throw a ball at someone. So let's just do that as an example. I think I actually have some paper down here. So if I was to, I do have some paper down there. Perfect, thank you so much. Good, more paper, great. So imagine I had to communicate something to Tom. And we have our typical couple of messages here, because we haven't done our work properly just yet. so we can see how that goes. So we have 4 messages, and I'm going to see how Tom copes with 4 messages. How many did you get?
You got 3, which is quite good.
Ah, come on, you're sitting down, you're cheating. But if you actually go back to actually reducing everything down to 1 message, it's becoming much easier. And I know this might be a little bit of a stupid exercise to do, but it really brings out the point about simplicity. So, and to be honest, we live in a very, very complex world, and I think you guys have discussed this tremendously over the last 2 days, living wages, all of that stuff. And the thing is, if we actually ask people, people do believe that the world we live in today is much more complex. For you as brands and as companies, this is a big opportunity because people want your help. People want your help to choose the right products that reflects their values, and you can help them with that if you manage to tell that story in a simple and engaging way. I'm not saying that you guys don't understand it. I absolutely love this Einstein quote. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. I'm sure that all of you understand it well enough. But the clash that sometimes happens is between departments, where that is between the marketing department, where that is with procurement. So do make sure that all the knowledge that you have, that you share it with everybody else around you. So one thing is this whole interdepartmental stuff that often goes wrong. And the second thing I see go wrong a lot of the time is time. We simply don't use enough time to find that one important message. I know this quote has been assigned to a lot of people. Let's just say that Pascal came up with it. But if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. As an author, it means a lot to me because I know how much difficult work it is to actually deduct those messages. But this both counts internally in your organization, but also when you take that brief and give it to your communication department or your agency people, do make sure that there's enough time to actually find out where is the beef in this story. And I see one clash happening all the time, and that is between the madman profession that I represent and the sustainability thing. Most of the work I do is actually bridge building, because so often I talk about how marketing is from Mars and sustainability is from Venus. And it's no fun to be the crazy Jack Nicholson who's trying to navigate this space, because the mindsets are so different. Because if you look at planet sustainability, what we want on planet sustainability is we're dealing with something that's very rational. It's about logic. We want these things to make sense. We want the numbers to make sense. But on planet marketing, we want it to be emotional. We want to move people. So this is where the clashes happens. On planet sustainability, everything is very complex. And just as we thought we kind of knew everything about social impact, it kind of changed and we forgot to measure something. On planet marketing, it really just needs to be very, very simple. So again, a big clash. Measurement on planet sustainability, but excitement on in the marketing, on planet marketing. And I must say, I absolutely actually loved when Puma launched their environmental profit and loss account, and they actually put that on their product so you could see the value of the carbon emissions and land uses, etc. I think it was a great initiative. But when you actually look at it up against, I can't actually remember what the shoe brand is called, I think it's Lift Shoes or something, which is a 100% biodegradable shoe that actually got a little seed in the sole so you can plant a tree or flower or whatever. That's excitement. Or information versus actionable. So yes, you can tell me and you can work with my logic and you can tell me I can save money. On the other hand, I don't know how many of you have seen this amazing campaign by Intermarché from France, where they actually put feelings into a carrot. So they talk about food waste, and they say in an ugly carrot in a soup, who really cares? So they're adding the emotional side to it. And why this is so important is that the way that we buy products, the way that we connect with brands, that doesn't work with logic. We might be able to explain it, but it's not the sphere of logic. The danger, though, is that too often marketing also takes things and deduct things into the banal. I mean, how often have I seen PT bottle producers talk about 10% less plastic and then suddenly talking about it as a green bottle? And I sometimes feel a little bit ashamed about my colleagues kind of overusing the word green, overusing the word sustainability on everything from high-rises to cars to etc. So that is, of course, the danger if we go too far onto the planet marketing. But I also do see brands that get it right and avoid some of these cliches, because most of the time it's avoiding the cliches and telling people a new, exciting story. One of the brands that got it right is Häagen-Dazs, and they experienced that their consumers didn't like all these artificial ingredients, and they had a lot of skeptics around it. So they wanted to talk about a natural ice cream without all these ingredients, but without using all the cliche words. So they come up with a product called 5, containing the 5 essential ingredients to make an ice cream: egg yolk, cream, etc., and the 5th ingredient always being the one that gave taste. So a very simple way of communicating. And why I so often talk about magic versus logic is that marketing represents magic in such a compelling way, because as I mentioned before, we don't make decisions following logic. If you actually look at the human brain and how it's all put together, in some of the oldest part of our brain, the limbic brain, this is a center of emotion, feelings, joy, happiness, and all that stuff. But it's also our center for decision making. Unfortunately, that part of the brain doesn't have a capacity for language. So when we sometimes have a car brand that we like or whatever, most of the time we, of course, try to rationalize it, talk about horsepowers, etc. But in fact, how we're touched by it is by the emotional side of things. So we have to be able to translate these numbers into emotions. And this is where it's becoming increasingly difficult. So the second question I want you guys to think about is then, what really rocks my world? What is it that rocks your target group's world? What is it that makes them excited? I think a lot of the stories, and why I'm so passionate about the sustainability field, is there are so many great human stories out there that just are waiting to be told. So ask that as your second question. What rocks your target group's world? And sometimes it doesn't seem logic. I mean, if you think about the emotional side of this thing, a panda driving a car, it doesn't make sense in reality, but it creates a visually stunning, exciting image. So that's the magic. And a second thing, when I went down there and I threw a couple of paper balls at Tom, the reason why I did that is that the second way our brain works is that it's a very visual brain. It's a very visual brain. So let's just try to test that out for a little bit. So what I want you guys to do is raise both of your hands like this. Good. So what I'm going to show you on the next slide, you're going to read the copy that says in what direction you need to point. So either, of course, left or right. So look at the copy and point in that direction, okay? Are you ready? Good? Yeah, good, perfect, good. Read the copy, point in that direction. Not so easy, not so easy. And it's not easy for that simple reason that we are visual creatures. So we want to do what the science says. We don't want to read the message. So when you think about how you craft your sustainability messages, too often you depend on planet sustainability, about logic, complexity, and you forget the magic. You forget the art of storytelling. And then that's where the planet clashes. And of course, there's a whole other arsenal. There's a whole other arsenal of exciting things in the toolbox of marketing, things like fun. Sorry, that was actually a second example of making something very visual. I don't know how many of you remember the T-shirts Nike produced up to the World Cup in South Africa. But again, telling that story in a very, very visual, simple way. So all 8 recycled plastic bottles go into making 1 football shirt. And I think they communicated that brilliantly. But as I said, other tools exist as well, such as, of course, this is actually another example of visual stuff. Sorry about that. This was actually from something that Nespresso did. They've done quite a bit in terms of their coffee farmers. But how do you actually tell this very, very complex story about coffee farmers? So they hired this documentarist photographer called Reza. He went down there, took lots of pictures from the plantations, created a beautiful coffee table book. They did a beautiful exhibition in Paris, and some of those images actually made it into the stores. So a very emotional way of telling quite a difficult story. But now on to the fun side of things. As a biobus is powered by your waste for sustainable future. So also a clever way of communicating something that I believe is very, very complex. So using humor is always a good idea. Or why not use engagement? I'm quite sure that quite a few of you have seen this campaign where they encouraged people to turn their clothing inside out so you could see what country the clothing came from. But again, transparency, it's no easy job. And again, never confuse transparency with honesty and authenticity, because we can be transparent. When I see guys like McDonald's opening up and saying, you know, let's talk about food, pose whatever question you want about our food and the practices. And I worked for McDonald's, so yes, I know the beef comes from Italy, a lot of the produce are sourced locally. The problem is just that people might not look at McDonald's as a food producer per se. So they can communicate a lot, but they might not seem that authentic. I often talk about subtitles, especially with my girlfriend. I'm sure that you all know about subtitles. So when my girlfriend says we're eating at a restaurant and she says, Thomas, would you like a dessert? The subtitle really is, I want a dessert and you're gonna share it with me. So that's the subtitle. And it's very important to think about these subtitles in communication as well, because else we go wrong. What is the connotation? What is the subtitle to the things? And quite often, for example, when you talk about countries, and I think this is quite important and goes back to the fashion campaign about clothing that goes inside out, is that countries like China, countries like Bangladesh, they have a connotation. You have prejudice against some of those countries. So you have a clear image that you need to go up and communicate against. Just to show you how it works, if we actually imagined that the Apple computer was designed in China but manufactured in California, something just happens in our head, and you need to think about those subtitles when you do your communication as well. But sometimes, honesty, when done brilliantly, it really does work. I don't know, probably not a lot of you has stayed at Hansbrinker Hotel in Amsterdam. It's a budget chain of hotels, but I absolutely love this little thing. Hansbrinker Budget Hotel, accidentally eco-friendly. And then it says eco-elevator. I mean, you get involved, you laugh, and I mean, that's what you got to aim for. So this is no easy exercise at all, but as I started out saying, I do think consumers care about a lot of these topics, especially the younger Generation Z. It's up to you guys to explain it to them, and I'm sure that it will pay off. So if you look at oh, that's actually not that slide. Anyway, the last thing I want you to think about as well is opening. So the times, places, and situations where the audience will be most attentive to and be able to act on the message. So when do you communicate that message? Which is also very important. So one thing is producing an infographic or whatever, but where and when should you actually do it? When is the most opportune moment to build bridge between intent and behavior change? This is an example from Denmark. I'm from Denmark. You can probably hear that on my Lego brick accent. But so what this retailer did called Danish Supermarket was that they wanted people to shift from caged eggs up until free-range organic. So the only thing they actually did was they changed the name on the packaging. So in Danish, it actually reads 15 Danish cage stacks. Very, very simple and very effective. So sales of cage stacks actually fell, and the sales of organic and free-range rose. So they chose an opportune moment to do that. Another example from Tesco. So this is printed on their delivery bag around food waste. So they give you good advice about how you can actually preserve grapes. Again, finding the right moment and the right time to do it. So that's probably the third thing I want you guys to think about, openings. When is the most opportune moment to talk about these things? And this brings me to an important point, because your job is to make these things simple. People want these products, you just need to make it simple, and then they're willing to pay more for it. And probably the best example is the search war that happened between Google and Yahoo. So when Yahoo actually was launched together with Google, Yahoo had about 63 links, Google had only one search field. And I think we all know how that search war ended. This is another example that just came up recently, a week ago. I don't know how many of you have seen this online. I think it's quite funny. So again, taking something very kind of complex. So on the one hand side, you have the directions to drive to the nearest Burger King, and this was of course put up by McDonald's. It's not very easy. The closest one is 258 kilometers away. McDonald's of course just wanted to say theirs are just 5 kilometers away. I actually saw a response to that one just posted 2 days ago from Burger King, where you see this guy that pulled into the drive-in by McDonald's. They pick up a coffee to drive to Burger King to eat the burger. So clever response by Burger King. So why this also makes sense is that we live in an age where we don't own our brands anymore. A brand is created by what people tell each other, not in the good old-fashioned way where we thought we could tell people what our brand is. So our brand is created in that interrelationship between people. So social these days are so important. We live in this ultra-transparent world, so social is important. The good thing about simple messages is that they're also more shareable. And you should actually go on to Siegel and Gale. So they do a global sustainability or simplicity index where they every year measure the effects of simplicity, which is quite interesting. So simplicity is no easy thing to get right. It's very difficult. But as I initially said, I believe that the brands that are able to take these very complex stories and tell them in a simple way have every opportunity to hold people's hands and build loyal followers. So your biggest job is really to answer that one big question is, can this be done or said more simply? So my last punchy message I'll leave to Jackie Chan, because he always delivers punchy messages. So keep it simple, stupid. Thank you so much.